341, where it says 7,000 years of history. Let's just rehearse this again, because it says all of the people who will be in the second resurrection. Remember, there's going to be a first resurrection. The first resurrection is for those who are alive and those who will be resurrected, who are in the Messiah, who have been called out. And then after that will be a second resurrection. Well, the second resurrection, everybody who will be there will have 7,000 years of the history of man as a guide and a warning to help base their life decision upon. Now that shows the mercy and the great blessing of Yahweh, that he's going to allow them to be able to see all of this history, 7,000-year history of mankind. Of course, that's the 6,000 years in which Satan rules the world, and then the 1,000 years that Yahweh will rule. So they will have that decision time to make. So these people have 6,000 years of the history of man that we're living in at this very day and age today. The area of mankind's history is now filled with every evil that you can think of every kind, predominating throughout the whole earth. Because remember, First Yochanan says that the gods have control over this earth. Now, Satan was given that control, and even Yeshua Messiah made that clear whenever he said, he said that Satan has control over the world. And so he showed that to be true. So this era of mankind's history is ruled, and that's why he said, I didn't come to destroy. I didn't come to destroy anything. I didn't come but to sin, not even to make peace at this time. But the fact is that he said he was going to come to divide families is what it's going to amount to, because the fact that some would open up their minds and desire to do what is right, and some would not. So this era of mankind's history is ruled by governments of the people, by the people and of the people, and against Yahweh. That's the era that mankind's history is ruled by today. But this era of mankind's history has been filled with warfare from its inception. And of course we know Genesis 4 tells us that there will be continual war, and there has been ever since. And of course we have incurable diseases, malnutrition and hunger, and unjust and unrighteous laws in this era. Now yet, they know that with all of these organizations that they have to feed the world, feed the hungry, and all this kind of stuff, if people if everybody in the world just gave $1, that would solve the problem right there. That would take care of and eliminate all hunger throughout all the earth. But of course, that's too easy of a way to do it, and they would never do it, because people would never always want control over things. And as Kissinger said, you control the food and you can control the people. And that's exactly what they want. So the evidence of this history, of this era of the history of man, will be presented to these people. And they will be able to see for themselves the results of following Satan's way, the way of Satan, during the 6,000 years. Now remember what we read in verse 1 and up there and at the top. These people in the second resurrection are going to have this 7,000 years as a guide and a warning to help base their life decision upon. This shows the fairness of Yahweh, that he's going to show them all these 6,000 years what occurred when man ruled himself and followed Satan's way. And then he says, since the people in the second resurrection will be brought back to life at the end of the 1,000-year reign of Yahweh through Yeshua. Okay, so this is when the second resurrection is going to take place after the millennial. The first one will take place before the millennial and will be only for the righteous. The second one would be for everyone who has ever lived on the face of this earth. Okay? Now that sounds astounding, but the fact is remember, we're being judged right now. So we're being judged as whether we're worthy for eternal life as we live every day. Okay? So it's going to be the same in the second resurrection, when those people are resurrected and their judgment time will come. Now, this will be a period when all of Yahweh's laws will be strictly enforced, and they will also be able to see the evidence of the history of man during the 1,000 years of peace on earth. Okay, and it's really sad when you have to think about that. You've got to force people to keep a law in order to have peace, but that's the way the human mind is made. They will be able to see the results of following Yahweh's way, a way of peace, joy, and abundant living for everyone. Now, in this era of the history of man, 1,000 years of world peace will envelop this planet. The animal kingdom will ever be brought into a peaceful coexistence with each other. Okay? And if you remember, the animal kingdom will be coming to existence also with man as well. If you remember in the beginning, in Genesis 9, 1 and 2. Can you see that? Genesis 9, 1 and 2. Oh, well. Can you see that? Guess I'm going to have to... I didn't set this up tonight, I guess. Huh? Verse 9 says, So Yahweh blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And the fear of you and the dread of you shall be on every beast of the earth, on every bird of the air, and on all that moves on the earth, and on all the fish of the sea. They're given into your hand. Okay, but you see there, the fact is the fear of man and the dread of man will be put in these animals. Okay, and the same was with man, that man would not be joyful to have snakes and rats and things like that running around, right? Crawling across your pillow and stuff. You wouldn't like that kind of stuff. So, but this is all going to change, and we'll be in complete unity with everything that Yahweh has created, because we know that snakes will have their purpose and they will no longer strike at a man and so forth. Even scorpions and so forth. None of these things, no mosquitoes and stuff would bother us. They will do their jobs, what they were meant to do, and so forth. So this is going to be a great, tremendous blessing. So the animal kingdom will be brought into peaceful coexistence with each other. The prophet Isaiah speaks of this marvelous 1,000-year reign when Yeshua and the saints will judge the nations and forcefully bring them into subjection to Yahweh's laws. In Isaiah 65, verse 24 and 25, it says, And it will come to pass. Now remember, anytime you see, and it will come to pass, it will come to pass. Okay? That's Yahweh's word. That's Yahweh's promise. When he says that, that means it's going to come to pass. You can book it. So it will come to pass that before they call, I will answer. And while they are yet speaking, I will hear. Now this is going to be the great time when the subconscious mind is given. And of course the scripture also says that they will hear their teachers, whispering in their ear, don't go this way to the left or to the right, but go straight and so forth. You will be teaching and guiding these people, and you will have this authority. Now the wolf and the lamb will feed together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox, notice. Right now the wolf and the lamb will not feed together. And of course a lion does not eat straw like the ox. But the dust will be the serpent's food, and they will not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, says Yahweh. Of course, the holy mountain is the kingdom of Yahweh. In Isaiah 11, 1 through 10, it says, And there will come forth a rod out of the stem of Yeshe, and a branch shall grow out of his roots, and the Spirit of Yahweh will rest upon him. Now, who's he talking about here? Exactly. This word him, that the Spirit of Yahweh will rest upon him, that's the man called the branch. And that's what it's talking about in verse 1 there. And now notice, this is prophecy concerning our overseer, okay? The spirit of wisdom and understanding. You think that's right? He's the wisest man on the face of this earth. The wisest man, okay? Praise Yahweh, because he's got the spirit of wisdom and understanding that comes from Yahweh, notice. And the spirit of counsel and might. The spirit of knowledge and of the reverence of Yahweh, and definitely the reverence of Yahweh, because you see it, the great love that man has for Yahweh in everything that he does, in leading us and begging us and pleading with us. As Yahweh says, he pleads with all flesh, and you definitely see it through the preaching of Yisrayl Hawkins, which will make him of quick understanding, notice, and his delight will be in the reverence of Yahweh, and you certainly see that. And this is the part I really like too, because he says, he will not judge after the sight of his eyes, nor will he reprove after the hearing of his ears. And how quick is mankind to do this, you snap to a snap judgment. You hear something, you don't know all the facts. You just hear something, you automatically think something automatically against somebody. But you don't know the facts. You don't even know exactly what went on. Well, that's not the way it is with him. He will not judge after the sight of his eyes, nor will he reprove after the hearing of his ears. But, notice, with righteousness he will judge the poor, and reprove with iniquity for the meek or the humble of the earth. He will smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he will slay the wicked. And that's exactly what he does when he preaches. As he says, he's not afraid about losing his job from the Vatican, He's going to bring it out the way it is. Righteousness would be the belt of his waist, and faithfulness the belt of his loins. And the wolf, notice, also will dwell together with the lamb, and the leopard will lie down with the young goat, the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a young child will lead them. A young child, notice, a little child will lead them. It's like Yeshua said, we must be as little children to enter into his kingdom. The cow and the bear will graze, the young ones will lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. The nursing child will play on the hole of the asp, and the weaned child will put his hand in the viper's den. They will not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth will be as full of the knowledge of Yahweh as the waters that cover the sea. And in that day there will be a root of Yeshe, who will stand as an ensign or banner, a signal for the people. To it will the Gentiles and the nations seek, and his rest will be glorious. Because that's what he teaches now, is the rest of the Sabbath day to the world, how to keep the Sabbath day properly, the way that Yahweh keeps the Sabbath day. Now, all the evidence of the history of man will be placed before anyone who is resurrected in the second resurrection. And they will see the evidence of Satan's 6,000-year rule. And then they will see the evidence of the 1,000-year reign of Yahweh through Yeshua. Now, although those in the second resurrection will be able to see the evidence presented, Satan will also be placed in the midst of mankind. And Satan will tempt and deceive all those who are rebellious to the peaceful ways of Yahweh. Now, this has to be because Satan has to be loose for that little season, okay? She has to be loose so that she can go out and she can tempt the nations, because they're going to have the 6,000 years of what man did, and 1,000 years of what Yahweh did. But Satan will be loose, so they'll have to make the decision. And it's sad to say, but there's going to be many who's going to go the other way and choose Satan's way rather than Yahweh's way. So she's going to be allowed to go loose and deceive the people. So what is deception? In a few words, deception is when one allows oneself to be drawn into the belief that he or she can have a joyous life by breaking Yahweh's laws. So you can see how clever that is, because deception, Satan has the whole world deceived, believing that they can have joy in their life, believing that they can have peace, that they can have whatever they want, and that's going to bring them satisfaction in life. And it's not. You can have all the money that they want in the world, and pay $3,000 for a suit that you could go to Sears and buy for $100, but in their mind, that brings them, satisfaction. They just spend all their money trying to find some type of satisfaction in life, and they can't find it because it's just not there. Well, Mother Eve was the first to be deceived by this kind of thinking, and Adam, of course, followed suit. But sin is placed in their minds by Satan, and it became something to be desired. Now, in Genesis 3, verse 6, it says, "So when the woman saw that the tree," of course, that first Babylonian church, when she saw that that church was deceivable for food, desirable for food, it's something that she wanted because she liked the teachings there, and it was pleasant to the eye. She liked what she saw, probably liked the way that she could dress too, and a tree desirable to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. And she also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. Of course, now, the woman was deceived, okay? Adam wasn't deceived, but Adam just gave in to his wife, okay, and followed suit. But Satan will use the same approach in the last 100 years of deception that she used on Mother Eve. Remember in Genesis 3, verse 1, she says to Eve, "Has Yahweh indeed said?" So she automatically started putting doubt in her mind, right? She started putting doubt in her mind, doubting what Yahweh said. Did Yahweh actually say that? Are you sure the house of Yahweh, that's what Pastor means when he says this? You see how deceptive that is when people think that way? They're falling prey to Satan. Okay? If you don't understand, ask your counselors. Ask the priest. Find out. But don't doubt what Yahweh's house teaches. Okay? Don't ever doubt Yisrayl Hawkins' words, because he's the only way you're going to have salvation. It's only through him that we can have salvation. Okay? You can't get to Yeshua Messiah without going through Yisrayl Hawkins. That's what the prophecies speak of. Now, Yahweh himself said, I'm going to be glorified through this man. Either you believe the prophets or you don't. Genesis 3 verse 5, it says, for he knows, again this is Satan speaking, for Yahweh knows that in the day that you eat of it, man, your eyes are going to be open. You'll be as gods, knowing righteousness and evil. You know, so you can see, like, isn't this something that you want? Isn't this something that you desire? You know, and come on, being righteous all the time is kind of boring, isn't it? You know, you can add a little bit of excitement in your life. You really don't have to keep those laws that strict, you know. I mean, you can enjoy this over here, you know. Come on, just give a little. Well, that's exactly what she did. She showed her this, that if she ate of it, then her eyes would be open, she would be as the gods, knowing righteousness and evil. So these same types of lies are being told today, just as they were told to Mother Eve then, because it says, have Yahweh's ministers told you that you must live by Yahweh's laws? They say the same thing, you know. Those old laws been done away with, you know. Don't you know Jesus did away with those old laws? Now you have a license to sin. You can break the laws of Yahweh because Jesus did it all for you. Well, you got to have a lot of nails stuck in that old stake. 613 of them, right? You nailed them all to the cross. And yet still, you could have joyous living by breaking Yahweh's laws? That's a deception. So all you have to do to have eternal life is just believe. Well, the demons believe, and yet they tremble. So who do you believe? Do you believe the lying preachers, or do you believe what Yahweh says? Well, he said, don't believe a word of it. These were exactly the same lies told to Mother Eve. In Genesis 3, verse 4, and the serpent said to the woman, you will not surely die. You know, like Pastor said, no, you're too important, man. You know, you're too important. That's not going to bother you. And it's the same thing in the world today, right? Everybody believes, oh, you know, well, yeah, there's STDs, but, you know, I'm not going to get an STD. You know, that's not going to bother me. That's for somebody else, you know. I practice safety. Yeah, there's real safety in sin. It just shows the great deception that's pulled over their eyes. Well, Satan created through deception within Eve's mind a lust for self, okay? And selfishness is the reason for all sin. When you only think of yourself. Because the law of Yahweh doesn't teach that. The law of Yahweh says you must love your neighbor as yourself. So you have to take care of yourself and respect yourself, but you must show that towards your neighbor. It doesn't just stop with you. Then you become conceited and selfish. Well, Eve was drawn, and you know, if we become selfish, then of course we don't want to serve. If you don't serve, you don't worship, right? So you can't possibly worship Yahweh. Eve was drawn into the sin then, just as the whole world is drawn into sin today. Sin and lust was spoken against by Yahweh's true prophets and apostles. And the apostle Jacob tells us in Jacob 4, verses 1 through 7, well, what causes wars and fightings among you? Is it not from you this? Is it not from your lust at battle within your members? Is it not that one nation wants what another nation has, so they go after it, you know, by any cost? They'll go after it and force themselves. They'll force democracy or demonocracy upon the nations, you know, for them to fall down so that they can go in and take what they want. You lust, but you don't have. You murder and covet, but you can't obtain. You know, you can go in, you can kill a whole nation. You know, they're so sick now in their minds that, of course, you know, they have the nuclear bombs, but they also have the neutron bomb. You know, way to go in there and destroy all the people, kill all the people, but it leaves everything standing because it just lets off radiation. So kill off a whole nation, and then what do? Wait 30, 40, 60, 100,000 years later and then go in and take the city over? You know, it just doesn't make any sense at all, you know. If it kills the people, it's going to radiate everything else around there, you know. So you're still not going to have the city to go in and the country to take over. They're just so stupid they don't think about these things. You fight and you war, yet you do not have because you do not ask. They don't ask. That's the whole thing. They don't ask, so they take what doesn't belong to them. You ask, but you don't receive because you ask with wrong purposes, in order that you might spend it on your own lust. See, that's selfishness. You adulterers and adulteresses. And of course, that's God worship. Do you not know that the friendship of the world is enmity with Yahweh? You become an enemy of Yahweh, because whoever will be a friend of the world is the enemy of Yahweh. You can't have righteousness and evil. You can't be evil of the world and hang on to it and still be righteous. We're trying to come out of this world. Remember that. We're coming out of the world. We have to come out of the world. That's what Pastor is talking to us about and trying to convince us to realize, to see these things. We got to come out of the world. We got to put the world away from us. And you're going to hear more and more about that. And the decision is going to have to be yours. It's got to be each and every one of us. But we can do it as a unit. See? We can do it as a unit. Do you think that Scripture teaches in vain that the Spirit that dwells in us lusts to envy? It's true, it does. So how much greater is the mercy He gives us? That's why He says, Yahweh resists the proud, but He gives mercy to the humble. Therefore, submit yourselves to Yahweh, resist the devil, and she will flee from you. See, that's the power we have over Satan. She'll flee from us. Only when lust is nourished rather than resisted does it bring forth sin. In Jacob 1, verses 14 and 15, but let each one who they are tempted when they are drawn away by their own lust and enticed, notice. Because you're going to be tempted. But temptation is not sin. But when you're drawn away by your own lust, your own selfishness, then you become enticed, and then lust, when it's conceived, it brings forth sin. And of course, sin, when it's fully matured, will bring forth death. Now, the thought of disobedience to Yahweh's laws is placed in the minds of lustful people through the teaching of Satan's preachers in this world today. The thought of disobedience to Yahweh's laws will also be placed in the minds of lustful people in the 100-year time of judgment, this judgment period. This lustful thought will bring deception and sin to many during the 100-year judgment, just as it does to this whole world now. It's going to be no different, Everybody who's ever lived will have to go through the same trials and tests that we're going through in these last days. Yahweh's fair. He's judging us all. So notice, in Jacob 1:22 it says, but be doers of the law and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. In Revelation 12, verse 9, and the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. She deceives the whole world by making people think that they don't have to keep the law. So if you will believe your Bible, and you will believe that this whole world has been deceived by Satan, one would surely think that the people who had evidence of the 2 eras of the history of man in front of them would never be deceived again. That's what you'd think. You'd think, well, surely they're going to look at the 1,000 years and say, yeah, I'll choose that, man. Who wants to go through the 6,000 years and choose that way of route? But reality is much stranger than fiction, for the facts from your Bible shows that Satan will manage to deceive many people into following her, even as they're deceived into following her today. Revelation 7:27 through 10, and when the 1,000 years was expired, Satan will be loosed out of her prison, and she will go out to deceive and seduce and leave astray the nations which are in the 4 quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. And they went up upon the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints in the beloved city, and fire came down from Yahweh out of heaven and consumed them. The devil who deceived them, seduced and led them astray, and was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet had been cast, and they will be tormented day and a night because of the ages. Now, of course, there's a lot of things to explain those verses there, but let's get into Gog and Magog. Notice this here. Gog and Magog. Now, this simple phrase, Gog and Magog, has baffled everybody who's tried to figure this out without the Holy Spirit of Yahweh, okay? You got to have that to unravel the meanings of the book of Revelation, and of course the prophecies, and especially the prophecies of Yahweh it talks about. But the literary resources from public libraries will all say about the same thing concerning Gog and Magog, because Gog is the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal. He came from the land of Magog, and in Yahweh chapters 38 and 39, he leads the evil forces which rise up to war against Yahweh in a climatic battle. And then in Revelations 20, verse 8, we see that Magog, by some strange process, is no longer a country, but a fellow culprit with Gog. Okay? But whatever the origins of the name that we have, we can be sure that the picture portrays this. It portrays the ends of the earth, as contemporaries understand them, arising against Yahweh. This included Persia, Cush, Put, Gomer, Togomer, Sheba, Dedan, and Tarshish. And they were the kingdoms of the world which would arise against the kingdom of Yahweh. And now they were epitomized and restored Israel, but the attack was doomed to failure. And one would expect such an attack to originate from the north, from which so many invasions had come to pass. And this involves the profound insight that ultimately the tension between the righteous and the evil must be resolved. Okay, now that's, in a nutshell, some of the things that they present. Now, the Interpreter's Dictionary of the Bible, Volume 2, okay, page 437, tells us this about the Hebrew word rosh, okay, because it talks about, it really has no relationship with Russia, but some of them say that rosh refers to Russia, and some say that Meshach refers to Moscow. Okay, but the Hebrew word rosh, which is used in here in the sense in Ezekiel Yahweh 39 verse 1, has no relation to Russia, nor does Meshach refer to Moscow, as it has been alleged. Okay, remember what First Kepha 1 verse 20 says. Here it is. First Kepha 1 verse 20, okay? It says, Second Kepha, not First Kepha. Second Kepha 1:20. Knowing this fact that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Okay, so you can't take it privately and just figure out your own self what prophecy means. Prophecy was figured out through prophecy, okay? It's Scripture interprets Scripture, and that understanding only comes from the Spirit of Yahweh, okay? So these people who say this, talking about Yahweh 39 verse 1, you know, they talk about Gog and Magog, and they try and figure all this stuff out, and they say that this is talking about Russia and Moscow and so forth, but it's not. The meaning of Gog and Magog has been studied by the Jewish scholars for thousands of years. Now, this is not a phrase that crept in when the book of Revelation was written. However, the Jewish scholars were not the only ones who had their stories about Gog and Magog. We see here in the Dictionary of Mythology, Folklore, and Symbols that it tells us that the British had their own ideas about Gog and Magog. Gog and Magog, names spoken together in the Bible, generally interpreted to mean the enemies of God. Gog was a Scythian prince or people symbolic of earthly power, antagonizing God. Magog seems to denote a country with its people who are reckoned among the descendants of Japheth. Does everybody got your books? Okay. Gog may be the king. Now notice what it says here. Gog may be the king of the country. In later books of the Bible, Magog appears to apply to northern nations of Europe, the peoples of which were enemies of God. In the New Testament, Gog, which is from the Hebrew meaning high mountain, is probably a corruption of God in an aid of Antichrist or Satan. The reference to Magog again appears to be a geographical term signifying the land of the people who are to be overthrown. In the Quran, Gog and Magog refer to the legendary predatory tribes against whom Allah sent Alexander the Great who built an impenetrable rampart of iron and brass between two mountains to hold them imprisoned until resurrection day. In Britain, Gog and Magog are the names of two wooden statues 14 feet high in the London Guildhall, which supposedly are those of survivors of a race of giants. Okay? And Gog and Magog were giants brought as prisoners to London, which they had chained in the Brute's palace, which occupied the site of Guildhall, where they survived as porters. And you see a picture there of Gog and Magog. And here it is. Gog and Magog. Okay, this is the same pictures you see here in the book of the Mark of the Beast. Gog on the left and Magog, the wooden effigies in the Guildhall, London. Okay? So you see that they look like warlike deities, right? Now, in the New Encyclopedia Britannica, Volume 5, shows a picture of these, and it says they are thought to represent the survivors of a race of giants destroyed by Brutus the Trojan, the legendary founder of London, okay, and brought here to act as porters at the gate of the royal palace. Effigies of Gog and Magog have existed in London from the time of Henry V. The first figures were destroyed in the Great Fire in 1666. They were replaced in 1708. And the second pair were destroyed in an air raid in 1940 and again replaced in 1953. You would think that they might get the picture, let them be destroyed, and don't keep making them. Okay? They didn't quite learn that lesson, I guess. Huh? Now, in Every Man's Dictionary of the New Classical Mythology, we read this. Gog and Magog, the giants of this name appeared by Geoffrey of Monmouth, and whose effigies were kept in London, have a history which seems to go back to Britain in the Iron Age, or even possibly to the Bronze Age. Magog seems to have been the goddess, and Gog, or Og, her husband or son, of a moon-worshipping, horse-using race, such as the Sumerians, who migrated on horseback. The thing is, what you want to notice here is goddess, okay? The goddess and the husband and son, okay? It's the Trinity worship there, okay? Og, the great, the giant king of Bashan, may have been the high priest of a moon god. While from the words of Yezekiezel, it seems that the hordes of Gog and Magog were mounted on horseback. Josephus was a Jewish historian who lived in the 1st century. He considered them to be Scythians, a description which included the Sumerians, and then Phineas Forza, the founder of the Milesian race, grandson of Magog, was described as a Scythian. However, notice, by the time that the cult had reached Britain, Magog was the great mother goddess associated with the horse cult, memories of which still persist in the ride of the Lady Godiva through the Coventry, clothed only in her hair, and in the Lady of Banbury Cross, who had rings on her fingers and bells on her toes. Now these are little nursery rhymes and all that stuff that they came up with. But the horse had to be white, although on certain occasions the woman riding it blackened herself all over. Now, really what that showed was the lust in God worship. The white horse of Uffington seems to have served as a model for the horse of early British coins. On its beak and disjointed legs, so they didn't even show it as an actual normal horse. It had to be deformed. And in the case of a coin found in Cornbury, 4 teats discharging milk, and was the emblem of a fertility cult. And that's what it all has to do with, this fertility worship. It's nothing more than God worship as it normally is. The white horse at Bratton, the early one, not the present copy, seems to have been improved by an extent where it was lost its original shape. Now, the point of these observations is that the white horse symbol appeared in Britain before the time of Alexander the Great, and the coining of the first stater, that's an ancient silver coin, with this horse on the reverse, from which the early British are presumed to have copied their coins. Now, why should they do so when they had a perfectly good horse of their own, which was also a well-known religious symbol. Okay, it's a well-known religious symbol. Now, even in the scriptures, you go back to 2 Kings 23, in verse 11, you see here where what occurred here is they went in, okay, this was place, it was defiled, and it says, and he removed from the entrance of the house of Yahweh the horses that the kings of Yada had dedicated to the sun. They were in the court near the room of an official named Nathan Melech, and Yeshua then burned the chariots of the sun with fire. Okay, so they actually had, this was, the horses were symbolic of the sun god worship, as they pulled the chariot to the sky and so forth. And you can see that they actually used this. They actually put this inside the house of Yahweh. That's how defiled that Israel had become. And if you remember, too, the horse, in Revelation 6, verse 2, it says, and I looked and behold, a white horse, which we talked about, right? The white horse, and to him who sat on the bow and a crown was given to him, went out conquering and to conquer. Okay? So you can see how this horse is a symbol of God worship, as it was used in that sense. Also for the war gods, because the horse is described in the scriptures as not being afraid to go out into battle, but actually loves the charge. And it describes in how its nostrils will breathe out air and start breathing in the air and filling in its lungs, and it starts stirring up and getting ready, and it's charging and going out to battle. You know, it's bred in him to do that. Well, recently a Cambridge archaeologist, Mr. T.C. Lethbridge, discovered on Wattleberry Hill, adjoining the Gog-Magog Hills, a more remarkable hillside figure of a goggle-eyed goddess, complete with chariot and horses, which you just saw there, that was actually put in the house of Yahweh even. Okay, that's how decrepit they had become. Complete with chariot and horses, and accompanied by a later period giant complete with a raised sword and a sun god of equal size. Both of these seem to represent the gradual displacement of the mother goddess by the father gods. But the popular belief in the old gods must have been too strong for the complete effacement. There were two other heel figures in Britain, which are contemporary with the Uffington horse. Let me show you that. This is the Uppington horse, okay? You can see how it has a horse shape to it. Okay. It's very old, but it looks like a prehistoric horse, okay? Now that's the Uffington horse, and then the Wattleberry goddess. These are the long man of Wilmington. This is the long man of Wilmington. You see that figure on the heel right there? See the man there with the two staves? Looks like two staves in his hand, one in each hand. Or is that what it is? Is he standing in the doorway? Very well could, right? Remember Janus? The god, the two-faced god. These are the long man of Wilmington, holding in each hand what appears to be a long staff about 140 feet in length. That's 140 feet. That's pretty tall. Okay, 140 feet in length, which may represent the doors separating day from night. Okay, day from night. And that's kind of like Janus. Janus is called the god of the doors. Okay, he's a two-faced god. He's got represented as two faces. In some places, he's a younger man's face and an older man's face. Some of the faces look identical, but he's looking forward and he's looking backwards in time and so forth. And actually, Janus was actually worshipped every day, the beginning of every day. Not just on January the 1st. And so the Cern giant, a Hercules type holding the upraised club, photographs of both of these give indications of other shadowy figures, now almost obliterated by vegetation, which may fit with the Gog and Magog theory. The dates of these figures have been put as between 400 BC, or 400 years before Yeshua, and 43 years after Yeshua, the time of the first Roman invasion of Britain. It is at least a possibility that the invasion of Britain by the Trojans, recounted by Geoffrey of Monmouth, with the overthrowing of Gog and Magog at Plymouth, might be a memory of the Belgae attacking and overthrowing the worshippers of Magog. Okay? Now, if you jump down to this last paragraph here, it says, while the worship of Magog in one form or another was known throughout Western Europe, the cutting of these hillside figures was peculiar to Britain, as also the ceremonial processions of a priestess or representative of the goddess riding naked on a white horse, while the populace was sternly enjoined to keep within their doors to avoid the breach of religious taboo. This is what it's talking about here on top of page 348. We're talking about Lady Godiva and the Lady of Banbury Cross. The picture of religious life in early Britain is gradually evolving, but is still incomplete. Now, Britain, actually, the word Britain, the etymology of it actually goes back to Britain, which in the 4th century before Yeshua, they were called the tattooed people. Because they wore so many tattoos. Now, the Everyman's Dictionary, page 254, tells us something about Og. Okay, remember about Og, what we just read back here in page 347, that Magog seems to have been the goddess of Gog, or Og, her husband or son. Og is the giant king of Bashan, from whose name we may have acquired the word Org, coined by Charles Perrault to describe man-eating giants. The name is frequently paired as Gog and Magog, when Magog was the moon goddess and Gog or Og her spouse or son. So it's Trinity worship, okay? It's the mother, Madonna and child, and the Trinity worship that's all wrapped up into this. In fact, the Og that was killed by Jack of the Beanstalk originally had 3 heads. But even that rhyme there, even that little story there about Jack and Beanstalk, it tells people so suddenly. The thing was that Jack had his mother, and they had no food, and so the mother said, "Okay, Jack, here, go sell an old milk cow so we can have some money, so we can get something to eat." They're down to nothing. So Jack takes off, and then this little old man meets him out in the woods and says, "Hey, what you got there?" And he says, "Look, I got 3 beans, magic beans here. You take them, and I'll take your cow from you." He says, "Well, really? Are they really magic?" He says, "Oh yeah, you plant them, and they'll grow all the way up to heaven." He said, "Well, what if they don't?" He said, "Well, I'll give you a cow back." So he goes back, and then his mother says, "What did you do?" And he tells him, and she starts crying. He runs off and disappoints his mother. So that sounds kind of, so there, and so he falls asleep. The next morning he wakes up and the beanstalk's growing up and part of the sunlight's knocked out. So he looks out and he says, "Wow, the beans grew, So he climbs up. He gets up there. So now what is he doing? He's trespassing on other people's property. Okay, so he runs up there, and this big giant lady, he scoops him up, brings him into the house, and you think that she'd want to harm him or whatever, but she doesn't. She actually protects him. She protects him in there, and then her husband comes in, who's a big old giant, and he comes in. He's the one who says, "Fee, fi, fo, fum." He smells the blood of an Englishman, and he's gonna be part of his blood on his toast. Cannibalism. That's funny. You laugh at that. That's real funny. And then of course he wants to kill him and stuff, right? So the woman actually takes him and hides him and says, "Just wait, he's going to fall asleep." So he falls asleep. And then later on, Jack actually sees the giant falls asleep. To get away from him, he starts sneaking out. Well, he steals this harp. It's this magic harp that has a carving of a woman on it, and she sings these beautiful songs and stuff, and she puts the big giant to sleep. Well, he takes that. And then, of course, he also takes this hen that lays a golden egg. Now, how in the world Jack can carry a giant harp and a golden egg goose, golden hen, and make it climb down a beanstalk from the heavens? I don't know. But he actually does. He gets down to the bottom, and, of course, the giant starts coming down. So he hollers to his mother and grabs the axe, and she starts chopping down the stalk. He starts chopping down the stalk, and it comes down, and the giant breaks his crown. He dies. So what did he do? This story is told to children worldwide. He murdered someone. He kills the giant. He stole from him. And yet they were trying to protect, the woman was up there, so would actually try to protect him. And he trespasses and so forth. Are any of those things taught in these fairy tales that they tell the lies to the children constantly? They never describe all the details of these things and say how evil they are and the evil that's actually being taught. But the child will listen and be fascinated by these things, you know, and learn a lesson that's actually poisoning their minds, thinking it's okay to steal from someone. It's okay to trespass. It's okay to harm someone. You just take what you want and steal from someone else. It's okay. If you want it, take it. And that's exactly how Satan has his whole world deceived. Anyway, getting back here, it says, so this giant here, Jack and the Beanstalk, originally had 3 heads. And so we see here, let me just read the underlined part. It says, all of these things are characteristics of actually describes it, okay? It describes these giants as being, you know, tall and big boned and broad faced and so forth. And it says, all of this describes the Ugrins of South Russia who penetrated to Europe and the Near East from the Black Sea. In addition, they were cannibals, notice. They were cannibals into Roman times, as were their kindred, the Skeths. Okay, now, what this is saying here, when you read between the lines, you can see that what it's talking about is they were prejudiced against these people. And they were describing these people as being one of these monstrous giants, okay? Because they describe them in the same way. And so it's painting a picture for others to hate these people. And Og, the king of Bashan, may well have been a Scythian intruder from the north who assumed the leadership of a tribe. Now, the Dictionary of Mythology, Folklore, and Symbols, Part 2, page 1200, tells us about Og. It's a name interpreted by ancient Hebrews to mean gigantic, long-necked, or he who goes in a circle, just doesn't know where he's going, right? Like a dog chasing its own tail. In the Old Testament, the king of Bashan was defeated by the Israelites under Moses. So the bottom line is that the worship of Gog and Magog, you know, it's been observed since the history of mankind. It's been there long ago. And Gog and Magog is simply nothing more than the system of mother-son fertility worship, which is what every pagan holiday that the world worships is based upon, right? Every last one of them is based upon this same thing. So all this is showing is that Gog and Magog is God worship. And it encompasses everything that the world believes in and practices. They just finished practicing Halloween, you know, go out trick-or-treating. And you look at the pictures, and it's so incredibly stupid that people will dress up in the way that they dress up, you know. And the adults are really into this thing. The other morning, turned on the TV to watch the morning news, and they had like 3 commercials about Halloween, back to back, you know. And it just promoted it and promoted it and promoted it. And especially, remember, Halloween is equal to Christmas and making even, in some cases, probably even more than what they produce in Christmas time, you know, because the adults are really into it. I remember when, you know, working in the world, I sometimes you'd be driving alone and then you'd stop at a red light and look over and there's somebody dressed up in a costume in the car next to you, you know, just like, you damn idiot, you know, and somebody driving a motorcycle, boom, 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 you know, in the ape costume or whatever. It's like, man, you know, they're so stupid, man. But they do it, you know. Their minds are just that gone to where they make complete idiots out of themselves. And that's what the gods want. They laugh at it. They enjoy it because it's God worship. You know, they love it. So Christmas, Valentine's Day, Easter, Halloween, Thanksgiving, all of those days, they're all have to do with this ancient fertility god worship. So it will be through Satan's deceit and god worship that those in the second resurrection will fall. Okay? That's what it's talking about here. They will fall away from Yahweh to the restored mother, son, husband fertility worship, which is today, the modern day Mary and Jesus, and just, and even in the Catholic Church, they also have Joseph. That's the Holy Family there. They got to have that Trinity there, the Father, Son, and Mother worship. But notice, it's all explained to us right here. If you go back to page 344, okay, page 344, in Revelations 20, verses 7 through 8, it says, "And when the 1,000 years were expired," it's on the bottom of the page, "were expired, Satan will be loosed from a prison and will go out to deceive and seduce, to lead astray the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, and the number of whom is the sands of the sea." So it's plainly telling you right there that this Gog and Magog are the nations that are out there who are deceived. Okay, it's the whole world deceived, falling into this God worship. Now, Revelations 20, verse 8 through 9, it says, "They gathered them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. And they went up on the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints and the beloved city. And fire came down from Yahweh out of heaven and consumed them." Now, the Apostle Yochanan here shows that there will be people in every part of this planet at the very time who will be worshiping Satan. And they will let Satan lead them up against Yahweh's holy people at Jerusalem. They encircled the camp of the saints, the beloved city, and we have seen from Zechariah chapter 14 that Yahweh commands his feast to be kept at Jerusalem. Of course, Jerusalem is, the city of peace. I'm not actually talking about Jerusalem. But therefore, it probably will be the people who obey. They will obey Yahweh with all their hearts. And, of course, Yahweh says, you got to keep the feast, and the feast is the protection of Yahweh. And, of course, Satan then tries to lead those who are deceived into attacking those who follow Yahweh. But, of course, the gates of hell will not prevail. So Satan will bring the God worshippers of all this planet against Yahweh and his holy people. But, of course, prophecy reveals that this last war, this will be the last war that ever be fought. Now, at this time, too, you got to remember, okay, it's going to get to the point to where Satan will deceive the nations will be uproared. They'll get to a point to where they're going to have nuclear war once again. However, it will not come to pass. This will be the last nuclear war that the world will ever see, what we see now. The world will not be destroyed again. At that time, it will get to a point after the earth, remember, after 1,000 years, after the earth is completely rebuilt, back to the way it was in Eden, when Satan is loose, she will bring the nations against one another to the point to where they will almost do the same thing again. But Yahweh's going to say, nope, not going to take place this time. And it will be wiped out. They will not be able to do it. And so that's a great blessing that Yahweh is going to allow this earth to come back to its original beauty. And it will be protected from that time on. But you see, it's got to get to that point. The world, at that time, everybody who has ever lived has to be tempted in the same manner in which we are, which will bring them to the point where their minds will be so confused to where they will want to once again destroy themselves. Even though they have 7,000 years of history to see that this way doesn't work. This way does. But they still have to make up their own minds. They still have to have their own choice. They've got to be allowed to do that, and that's when Satan is loose to allow them to do that. Now, in 1 Corinthians 10, verse 20, it says, "And I say that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to devils, not to Yahweh. And I would not that you fellowship with devils." Okay? Well, there's only one devil, actually. But this is talking about demons. And 1 Corinthians 10:20 has been translated so that no one would have complete understanding. That's the way it is in the King James. The first thing to notice is this word translated devils. There's only one devil, not many devils. The one devil's name is Satan, as Revelation 20 verse 7 plainly shows. She is that old serpent. However, there are many demons, and the demons are the fallen angels who have followed Satan in her rebellion. The word translated devils in 1 Corinthians 10:20 is word 1140 in Strong's Greek dictionary, and it means either devil or God. Notice 1140, okay? Demon. It means a demonic being, by extension, a deity, devil or God. Okay, so that's what you think about when you think of a deity, because a deity is a god, and it's just something that exalts itself against Yahweh, remember. 1 Corinthians 10:20 should have been translated so you completely understand that as Satan the devil, whom these Gentiles were sacrificing to. In 1 Corinthians 10:20, the King James Version, but I say to you that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to the devil and not to Yahweh. I choose not that you should fellowship with the devil. Okay? Now, this word fellowship, notice, it's number 2844 in Strong's, and it's derived from 2839, and it means, notice, 2844, it means a sharer, an associate, a companion, fellowship, partaker, or partner. This is what takes place when we fall from Yahweh, okay? If we're not a worshiper of Yahweh, then we partake and share in the worship of Satan herself. We become a partner with her. It comes from 2839, which means to profane, common, defiled, unclean, and unholy. Well, this is exactly opposite of what Yahweh talks about his saints, his people. You know, his people are not profane, they're holy. His people are not common, they're great, right? His people are not defiled, they are back in touch with him. And they're not unclean, they're clean, and they're holy. So to associate or to be a partner or a companion to the devil is to be a partaker and a partner in being ceremonially profaned and defiled. And that's what takes place when these people of the world keep these religious holidays. They actually associate and become partners of Satan herself. But they don't realize what they're doing. You know, I'm telling you, if you could go and tell a person when they, doing even Christmas. Now, come on, man. Christmas is for the children. It's such a fun time. It shows love for your brother. You go out and you buy him a present and give him a present. Well, show me in the scriptures when the laws of Yahweh where it says to do such a thing. They're totally deceiving. And if you had the power right now in your subconscious mind to walk up to a person, to open their mind for just a split second and tell them you're worshiping Satan when you do this, you would freak that person out because they couldn't handle it, because they don't realize they're worshiping Satan. Satan is as real and alive to them as Yahweh is to us. You understand that? That's why it says, give all glory and honor and praise to Yahweh, and be thankful every day of your life that Yahweh has called you to his house. Okay? Because the world just does not have that understanding. They don't realize these things. They believe in Satan and they worship Satan. All right, we got to stop here on page 352, so we'll stop about the middle of that page so the Kahan next week can take off from there.